one of our podcasts gets between $3,000 and $4,000 a month. How much can I expect in ads?
$20 per 1,000 views. For like programmatic dynamic ad insertion, it would be lower.
Number one platform for podcasting? Is YouTube next?
Yeah, I think so. It is the biggest single destination for content. In the podcasting world, YouTube is hard because there's like, for someone who kind of lives and has a business in the creator economy, it largely is alive. You have to have that domain knowledge to just know what your customers want, what your audience wants, and then you have to go do it. A lot will happen around AI.
Can you talk to me about lead generation?
Meet somebody that's doing interesting stuff, get their perspective, learn, and I think if you approach it like that, it's really healthy. I think the place that it falls down is when people get greedy, and being an entrepreneur is a lot harder than having a day job.
What kept you going then?
I just deeply, deeply dislike being told what to do. For all the kind of shit of entrepreneurship, the best thing is...
Craig, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. Pleasure to have you here. We're going to talk about lots of very interesting stuff here. But maybe for the people who don't know you yet, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Craig Hewitt. I'm the founder of Castos. We are a podcast hosting and analytics platform. So we are the kind of content platform that your podcast is distributed to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and YouTube. We also have a production service arm to our business called Castos Productions, where we help about 60 customers right now kind of put their podcast on autopilot by doing audio, video, marketing assets, show notes, and publishing for their shows every week.
Amazing. So I want to spend a bit of time on that. How does Craig Hewitt comes to create Castos? What I mean, take us back in the days where you were like, hey, I'm going to create Castos.
Yeah, so it's the classic, like the term is like dog fooding, and it's a terrible term, but I think I like that. I like drinking your own champagne, like that. You can appreciate that as a Frenchman. Is I started a podcast, and it's still going today. We just published episode 311, I think, nice. And it's called Rogue Startups, and it's really just about me and entrepreneurship and kind of me learning about small business and online business, and after like a few episodes, I was like, wow, this is like really great, but it's a pain, right? Anyone who has a podcast knows it's a pain. It's like, I got to edit and I got to market and I got to do all this stuff. I got to do show notes. And this is way before video was a thing. And so I was like, I bet I can like just charge money and do this for other people, because I learned how to use in the days like GarageBand and Ophonic pretty well. And so I did, and we got a couple customers, and we got a couple more, and we got a couple more, and that business was called Podcast Motor. And then one of our clients from Podcast Motor was like, hey, I have a friend who has this WordPress plugin that he wants to sell because he's going to work at Automatic, like the parent company of WordPress, and now one of our investors. Do you want to buy it? It's in the podcasting space. I know you're in the podcasting space. I was like, yeah, cool. Let's do it. So we bought the plugin, and then we built Castos as like an integration into the WordPress plugin. And the plugin is called Seriously Simple Podcasting. And so, you know, in hindsight, from a business perspective, what we did is we bought like an audience and a customer acquisition channel. And we built the business on top of that. And that's been a huge part of our business, even today, like 7 years later.
That's crazy. So you have, just to summarize and make sure I am following properly.
Yeah.
You launched a podcast. Actually, why did you launch a podcast in the first place? Why did you want to talk about entrepreneurship and small businesses? What was the idea behind it?
Yeah, so that this is maybe a sneaky segue for you. It was a networking chance, right? Like I didn't know anyone in the space, but I wanted a chance to talk to them really well, and I know we're going to talk about this later. And like surely 8 years ago when I started my podcast, like it was the best way to network with people. I had New York Times bestselling authors on just because I asked them, and the podcast was like so novel. Now it's a little harder, but yeah, networking was the thing. I just wanted to be in the space. I was a wantrepreneur at the time. Like I'd hugely failed a couple of things, had no idea what I was doing, but just wanted to be talking to people, and that was the vehicle that I wanted to do it through.
Cool. So then an acquaintance of yours or a friend of yours comes to you and say, Craig, I have this friend selling a website that is talking about podcasting, well, a blog talking about podcasting. Do you want to buy it? And you say, sure. You buy it, and then you build something around it. Or did you have Podcast Motor before buying the blog? Or how did it go?
Yep. So we had Podcast Motor as the service before. And then,
Okay.
yeah, it was a client of ours there who had a WordPress plugin that they wanted to sell. And then we bought that, and then we built
WordPress plugin.
Castos. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And that was how long ago?
Oh, my goodness. 6
Less than 8
years
years.
ago? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. 6, 8 years. Yeah.
Okay. So you buy that plugin. Actually, and you can not answer if you'd like, Craig, but how much does a WordPress plugin sells for? I actually have no idea.
I think it depends. In the
Okay.
thousands when we did it.
Okay. Okay. So that feels reasonable. And then I guess it depends on the number of users and who is using it
Yep.
and to which extent and can you monetize it and so on and so
Exactly.
forth. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have the service kind of company. You buy this plugin and you build Castos, and then you have Serious Simple Podcasting. Can you walk us through that? What is Seriously Simple Podcasting exactly?
So if you have a WordPress site, so you're a big company, right? Or you're a brand or you're an e-commerce or whatever, and you want to have a podcast as part of your website, you can like custom code all the stuff up, page and a profile and the player and all that kind of stuff, or you can just install a plugin that does all that stuff for you, and that's what we do. So for folks who want to have a podcast on their WordPress site and manage it from there, manage their content all in one place, Seriously Simple Podcasting and Castos is a great solution, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to go publish my podcast. I got to go over here to, Anchor or Libsyn or whatever garbage, right? I got to publish it there. I got to copy the show notes. I got to copy the iframe player. I got to copy all this. I got to make sure they're published at the same time. Like you just do all that from one place, and it's great.
Okay. All right. So takeaway from this is shots fired on competition. We are starting. Okay. Cool. But so that's fascinating. And how? So because I have the opportunity to do, I didn't even know that we were going to talk about this. But what's the business model of a WordPress plugin? Like, how do you? Is it a free one, like Seriously Simple Podcasting, or do you have like? Okay, and so you have a freemium then, so it starts free, and then you can sell a. How does it work?
Yeah, exactly. So that's our freemium model, right? So we have about 30,000 users of the plugin, and then some percentage of those have upgraded and used Castos to be really like the place where their content is stored. They get advanced analytics, they get a bunch of like repurposing, free transcripts, integration with YouTube, all this stuff. So the plugin is kind of the connection to their website, and then Castos is just like a much more feature-rich way to podcast that is integrated with that.
Okay.
And then now
So that's
today,
how-
about half of our customers use WordPress, and about half don't. They use Castos by itself, like they don't have a website, or they don't want to have a website, they don't care, it's just not that important. We have built-in websites at Castos, but they're pretty straightforward, right? It's just like a list and a page and like a subscribe page, and that's it. But if you're a big old like travel blog, or you're another SaaS company, or you're selling consulting services or whatever, like you want a pretty comprehensive website, and you want your podcast to be like natively in that site. And that's what we do with our WordPress plugin.
So I love that there is a huge differentiating factor here. The fact of integrating on someone's website and not just being a kind of hosting and publishing company, right?
Yep.
That's super cool. How did you, did you end up falling into the podcast industry by accident, or why did you go down the rabbit hole of this specific industry? Because I guess you could have done it for anything else then, right? Or is it just because you were using podcasts as a medium, and then one opportunity after another, you just went there?
Yeah. It was quite a bit just by chance. I think that's how a lot of things go, right? Is like I'm looking for opportunities, right? And I see this opportunity, and I kind of take it. I think it's pretty rare that we say, I want to get into business in the electronic signature app, and so I'm going to build an electronic signature product.
Oddly specific.
So I have a friend that does that. Sometimes that happens, but I think sometimes it's like, because you need an advantage, right? Whether it's in podcasting or in business or in life, you have to have like this unfair advantage, and so that usually is like domain expertise, right? So like me having a podcast and then running a podcast agency, I can build podcasting software arguably better than a lot of people, even though I'm not a developer. And so I think this is where, we saw the opportunity because I had domain expertise. I had a little bit of an audience, right? I was known a bit in the space. it was easy for me to do that because, again, like whether it's a podcast or a blog or a YouTube channel or a business, you have to have that domain knowledge to just know what your customers want, what your audience wants, and then you have to go do it, right? You have to make the podcast, you have to make the YouTube channel, you have to make the software, and all that's hard. Yeah. It's super hard if you don't know what your audience wants.
Yeah, 100%. Be your own client, eat your own dog food, or better, drink your own champagne. Drink you know what? I'm gonna steal that one. Craig.
Yeah,
it's a great one. So what's next then? Because you're going from, that's super interesting. You're going from opportunity to opportunity. You start a podcast because you want to network with your podcast. Funny, that rings a bell to me. You have an opportunity, somebody sells you a plugin that you build a SaaS on. And now you build this podcast hosting and distribution company. Spoiler alert. What's next? What's the next opportunity?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because, I mean, just really transparently, podcasting during COVID, right, saw this huge boom and we did really well. It was kind of a bit of a guilty scenario, right? COVID's happening. Right. We were a remote team anyhow. So it was just like, whatever. Like I was living in France at the time. Business as usual for our team, other than just, family and kids and COVID happening. But business was great. People were starting podcasts left and right. A lot of businesses like ours saw quite a positive benefit from COVID. That and the economic environment in the last kind of 2 years has changed quite a bit to where, like, I talked to a lot of our competitors and they're like, yeah, we're pretty flat. Podcasting as a medium is not growing nearly like it was. There's a whole bunch of players in the space. And so business is just different. And so I think a lot of us are looking at it and saying, like, what's next? I think there's a few things, and I don't know the answer, but the few things that we're really paying attention to. One is AI, obviously. Like, AI is going to change all of our lives enormously. And if you don't believe it, just watch some of the Sam Altman interviews. And like, he's an ultra brainiac, like probably the smartest person I know, or I don't know him, but like I know of. And the stuff he says just blows my mind. Right. But he said something recently where, someone asked him about, like, hey, how do you feel about when you go release a new model or a new feature or something like that and it just decimates an industry, right? Like they decimated the transcription industry overnight, basically. And he said 100%. You can, as a business person or a consultant or a freelancer or a podcaster, you can look at AI and fight against it and be scared, or you can say, how am I going to like ride the coattails of this thing and go along with it to where, like, I can't wait for the next model or the next feature to come out because it makes me that much better. And that's where we are with AI. It's like we definitely have AI in our product. We started offering free transcripts for all of our customers because AI and the technology is such that we can do it pretty cost effectively. Just for reference, for all of our customers and all the episodes, it costs us a few $100s to transcribe them every month.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, it would have been $10,000. So it's like an order of magnitude less. Yeah. So AI, obviously, just like, don't know, but a lot will happen around AI. YouTube, again, obviously is the big question. YouTube and video. We are one of the few podcast hosting platforms that, one, supports video. So you can do video podcasting at Castos. You can't at a lot of other platforms. And we have an integration with YouTube already. So if you're publishing video, we push it right to YouTube for you. If you're publishing audio, we take audio, convert it to video, and publish it to YouTube for you. And so I think YouTube is, in the podcasting world, YouTube is hard, right? Because there's like, should this video be on YouTube as a YouTube video or a podcast episode? And then YouTube is doing YouTube podcasts, right, as a replacement for Google Podcasts. So there's just like, there's weird rules from YouTube around like ads and programmatic ad insertion, which we do and we can't on YouTube. And there's just like maybe more questions there than the AI one. But that is something we talk about all the time. It's like, how can we ride those coattails of video, and how can we position our product even more so? And I think we're already probably one of the best platforms to do video and integrate with YouTube. But how can we do a little better? And the last one is monetization, right? I mean, monetization for podcasting is currently terrible. And I think it's largely because it's based on the radio model, and ads. And we just think there's a lot better way to do it. And it's just hard. There's some headwinds there, from a creator perspective and from an audience perspective that everyone has to overcome for us to change the status quo.
Whew, so much to unpack here. I absolutely love that. So to begin with, here is my 1 minute hot take on AI, especially in our industry. I think that this is the perfect interview to talk about this, but AI is a huge opportunity, and you're doing it as well, right? So podcast production and services are also impacted, obviously. Like you don't sell a marketing asset from podcast content the same way you were selling it 2 years ago, because now you can just put your short into Riverside, put your video into Riverside or Opus or any of the tools that do that, right? Yeah. Now, the way we pitch it to our clients is, yeah, sure. You want an 80-20, you want to like publish lots of content almost for free. AI is the way to go. And I cannot compete against that. Now, there is some caveat here. If you can do AI, so can every other podcaster. Meaning, you get to publish 15 times the amount of content you were 2 months ago, but so is everybody else. Yet, the audience on the social media platforms hasn't increased 15-fold. So the noise has increased, but not the audience. So how do you stand out from that?
Yeah.
And that's the thing where we say, now it's costly to be in the top 1% because you have everybody else doing the same thing. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, if you want to do it right, AI is amazing. If you want to do it right, you still need to go in the platform, see the content it has selected for you, tweak it a bit, add some effects, put the right hook, it's going to be the crux. All this, at the end of the day, takes time. And the people we target, at least, are people who are short on time but large on money, quote unquote. Everybody needs to save on cost, right? But that's the thing. So AI is a huge opportunity because it decreases the barrier to entry, in my opinion. So it's much easier to produce content, but then to make that amount of views and that amount of relevant views that you can then direct towards the place where you want traffic, that's where the crux is for businesses. And that's where agencies and actors like us, I guess, you and I, Craig, because we pretty much do the same thing on part of our business. That's where we make a difference, I think. And that's how we can not fight against AI. Totally agree with you. Like, hey, it's there. If that's your objective, go for it. But how do we leverage it in the best way to actually allow our clients to stand out? YouTube. Talk to me about YouTube. So what do you think about it? Is it going to be the platform that is really going to take a big market share in, 6 years' time, like Spotify did? Because they are now officially, since less than a week, number one platform for podcasting, more downloads than Apple Podcast. Is YouTube next?
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Amazing. Yeah. Why?
I just think that YouTube has so much tailwind to it, right? The momentum behind YouTube is so much stronger than I would arguably say like anything else in digital media, right? Bigger than blogging, bigger than newsletters, bigger than podcasting, bigger than most social media, even, TikTok getting, banned or sold in the US, right? All this kind of stuff. And even you look at platforms like LinkedIn, who's experimenting with like a TikTok type short reel feed, and you go, well,
right,
shit, like YouTube already has it with shorts, right? Like why it is the biggest single destination for content, I think, right? Because the web, right, blogs are totally distributed. There's not a single place that people go. Apple got quite segmented with Spotify, or podcasting got quite segmented with Spotify, right? Apple Podcasts for a long time, they neglected it, arguably. Spotify comes in and starts eating their lunch. Social media, right? Like I'm on 4 different social media platforms, so my focus and my audience is split between those. But if you go, I want video, you go to YouTube. I can't imagine another TikTok maybe, but that's just for shorts. And so I think podcasting will continue to go in the video route, and they will get all of that market share. That's where the growth will come from. I think audio podcasting, like after we hang up, I'm going to the gym and I'm going to listen to an audio podcast there. But But if I was home, I would watch it on YouTube. And so
Really?
I think that's, yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting. I wanted to challenge that by saying, I mean, as you very accurately said on the end, podcast is an audio format to begin with. Anybody who starts a podcast will say, yes, you should be on YouTube, because in any case, you're probably recording with Riverside, Zencaster, Google Meet, Zoom, to name a few. I mean, there are plenty of tools out there. You can have your pick. So if you can have an audience there, why not publishing it? If you're recording with video anyways. Yes, you're going to still have tons of people who are going to listen with their Spotify app or whilst they're doing something else, basically, because that's the nature of podcasts. So it's interesting. I would have not been so certain about YouTube taking over. I think they will take some market shares, especially in the, as you said, the moment people are watching. I think Spotify had released the thing saying like the audio podcast is consumed during the day and the video podcast on their platform is consumed during the evening, because people take the time to sit down and watch. But that's super interesting.
And I heard recently at home on the TV, like you have a smart TV and has the YouTube app, families are watching podcasts on YouTube now, which is a first.
Really?
Sorry, given the reaction thing. Yeah, we don't do it as a family, but I can imagine, like, if there was a cool like science thing and we wanted to watch it, or a travel thing as a family, we would watch it on the TV and the YouTube app.
Wow.
Yeah.
But so actually, let me ask you some insider information then, Craig. How many of your clients do you see? I mean, in proportion, right? It doesn't have to be a precise number, but in proportion, how many people are uploading and using the video feature on Castos? Then do you see like a growth in that medium as well?
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest growth segment we have. It's the biggest adoption of a feature we have.
Okay. Wow.
And another data point is with our production service. In the last year and a half, every single new client we've had is doing video.
Right.
Yeah.
So isn't that, then we're talking about AI lowering the barrier to entry, but isn't having to do video increasing it or hiring it? I'm not sure of my English here, but you see what I mean.
Exponentially, right? I mean, so I'm talking today on my regular webcam, and I'm sorry that it's not as good looking as it would be with my digital SLR camera, but Mac OS updated and stopped supporting the Canon webcam software or whatever. And so my $800 camera is just sitting on the side, and I can't use it right now. And that's just an example, right? It's like I have two $150 lights, and I have the background, and I have all this stuff, and it's like video is so much more complicated than audio, like 10 times. Right. But it's totally worth it.
Yeah, 100%. Speaking about lights, I still need to improve my setup. But that's another topic.
Yeah.
So if the barrier to entry is higher, are the rewards bigger as well? And here I'd like to talk about something you touched upon already, Craig, but monetization. Talk to me about monetization in the podcasting world. Like how does it work, maybe to begin with?
Yeah, so generally I put it into two buckets. You can monetize your podcast directly or indirectly. So directly is, I'll say indirectly first, is how I monetize my podcast. So my podcast is just about me and business, and indirectly I hope that people learn about Castos and become customers. And that happens kind of all the time. But it's kind of a dotted line between those two. Directly is ads, paid subscriptions, donations, a thing where a listener pays you money for creating the content. The analogy would be like for newsletters would be like this newsletter is paid and you have to pay to access the newsletter, as opposed to on this newsletter I'm like promoting my thing and I hope you buy it later. Mm-hmm. And I think the problem that you're kind of getting at is like, for creators to make a meaningful amount of money, they have to have a really large audience. And we have tens of thousands of data points on this, and it says that is exceedingly rare. So on our platform of about 5,000 customers and say like 30,000 podcasts, we have less than 100 that make more than $20 a month from ads.
Sorry. That's crazy.
And now, not everybody wants to make money from ads. So I'm not saying that like not that few people have that many listens. Well, but I will say we probably have less than 100 that have more than 10,000 downloads an episode a month.
How many? Sorry, so
Less than
10,000
10,000 downloads a month. Less than 100
And so,
customers.
yeah, okay, that's crazy. So what's the alternative then? Because I guess play the devil's advocate. If I'm making $20 out of my podcast in advertising, well, at least that pays for my podcast hosting subscription, right? So hey,
Yeah.
that's something. It's self-sustaining if we don't take into account all the time invested in it, and the gear, and other softwares. Anyways, you get my idea. But so, what are other avenues then to monetize a podcast, or at least to make something out of it that could be profitable on the short or long term?
So I think that for most people, indirectly monetizing your content is the way to go, right? Like, I have this podcast to build an audience so that I can then do something with the business afterwards, right? Consulting, coaching, productized service, SaaS, whatever it is. I think that's probably the easiest way to make a lot of money. If you want to directly monetize, then it's that's so funny with the reactions. It's killing me.
Yeah, I love it.
Then it's probably some sort of listener support, so donations or subscriptions.
Can that be substantial though? Because I was doing the math with the potential client actually yesterday.
Yeah.
Let's even say that you get 2,000 downloads per episode, right? Which is already probably in the top 5% podcast, even less. And you convert 10% of those, so 200 people, which will pay a reasonable amount, so between $5 and $10.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably making in the, $1,000, which is not nothing. Just to be clear, it's already starts to be decent money for a side hustle, but you don't make a business out of this. So even that, the subscription model is better than nothing, I'd say.
Yeah.
But definitely not gonna get you big places.
Yeah.
So what other avenues, Craig, do you see?
Yeah. No, I first of all, I totally agree. And for someone who kind of lives and has a business in the creator economy,
right.
I think it largely is. I don't want to say it's a lie. It largely is a lie, right? Because you see Jay Klaus out there, and I know Jay. He's been on our podcast before. Jay's an amazing guy, but like he's the 0.0001 of the creator economy, right? And so to say, oh well, Justin Welsh does this, or Jay Klaus does this, or whoever does this, like the chances of most of us doing that are really, really, really small. And so, yeah, I think that you have to have another approach to it. Direct monetization of like subscriptions or donations is better than ads. So do that. I think don't rely on ads. Ask for your listeners to support you. But the way I like to do it, and the way I am starting to do it now, I'm just starting to monetize my podcast after like almost 10 years. Is
congratulations,
is just going directly to people in the industry who have very tight alignment between me, my message, my audience, and their ICP, their ideal customer persona. And so what I would do is say, hey, like I talk a lot about SaaS and entrepreneurship, so I go to companies who we are a customer of, maybe, right? So hey, we're a customer of this special type of billing software. Hey, do you guys want to sponsor my podcast? Here's the kind of breakdown. Here's the analytics report from Castos. Here's kind of who we talk to. And this is what the investment is. And so you got to put on your sales hat a little bit here. And you got to say, me and my brand and all this is worth this. And do you want to buy this? And so I think this is the hard thing is creators want to just like make stuff in their basement and then put it out there and the world fall in love with it and they make money magically. But I think what you would find if you talk to a lot of these creators is they're actually probably quite good salespeople, and they're able to package their audience and the value of their audience in a way that sponsors understand. Because I'll just be transparent, like my podcast gets about 700 downloads an episode, and we're going to ask for $1,000 a month.
Fairly good. Okay. And you publish 4 episodes a month.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Wow.
And that's a tiny podcast, right? And I know that. But the value to, a SaaS company or a product company in the SaaS space to get in front of 700 people every week is massive.
100%. Yeah. And any SaaS solution will probably sell a service that is, it depends if it's for large consumers or like B2B, but like a SaaS lifetime value of a customer is indeed pretty high. So if you
Sure.
manage to sign 1 or 2 clients a month, you break even, and then it's all gain. Actually, quick. I don't know if it's a personal question, Craig, but wouldn't you sponsor your podcast with Castos? Like, why looking for another actor in the place? Because I guess there will be somehow an overlap.
Yeah, no, I think so, and I guess I've kind of been doing that indirectly. Like I talk about Castos quite a bit,
Right.
and I would suppose that most of the people that listen to my podcast already know about Castos.
Right.
So I guess that's why
sense.
I wouldn't otherwise.
What does it mean to actually get ads money on a podcast? Like on YouTube, the metric rises revenue per mille, which is the French for thousand. So for every 1,000 views, you get a certain amount of money. It's pretty low on YouTube. What is it for podcasting? If I'm to say like, okay, my podcast, one of our podcasts gets between $3,000 and $4,000 a month, how much can I expect in ad?
I think it depends on the type of ad that you're talking about, but it's the same model. It's CPM, cost per thousand, CPM, cost per mille.
Right.
And for like programmatic dynamic ad insertion, it would be lower, say like $5 to $8. If you're going out and selling ads and they're host read, the industry average is around $20.
Okay, host read ads, 20,000 per 1,000 views.
$20 per 1,000 views.
$20. That'd be the dream.
Yeah.
Okay, wow. So definitely that's not the best way to monetize a podcast.
So, but you can imagine an episode has 2 or 3, right? Like a pre-roll, 2 mid-rolls, maybe a post-roll, which would get less. So you could get say 3 impressions per episode. You have 4 a month. That's 12. So, yeah, I don't want to do the math live on the air, but you would divide what you want to make by 20 by 12, and that's how many listens you want to get.
Right. Okay. So, yeah, that's probably not the best way to go unless you're making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of downloads per month.
Yeah. Yep.
Can you talk to me about lead generation and networking? And I think you're the person to talk to about this because that's probably a technique you've employed yourself. So what is that and how does it work?
Yeah, well, you too, right? I know that you reached out and we're on this because we wanted to be friends in the industry, and we are, right? And that's great. And I think if you approach it that, then it's really good and healthy. And that's how I've always approached it, is like, hey, I just want to meet interesting people doing cool stuff. I want to learn, and we just happen to record this to share it with everyone else. And that's kind of how I approach a lot of my content, is like, I don't want to go interview someone for my podcast, or you don't want to interview me for your podcast for the audience as much as you want to just like meet somebody that's doing interesting stuff, get their perspective, learn and grow. And I think if you approach it like that, it's really healthy. I mean, I started my business from my podcast. I raised some money. We moved to some interesting places. I've made a ton of friends. I've gotten so many opportunities for my podcast, all because of the guests, not because of the audience. I think the place that it falls down is when people get greedy and spam their guests and try to take advantage of the situation. And what I mean is, say you have me on this podcast right now. We're having a great time. If you're like, okay, we're done, and then for the last 10 minutes, you pitch me on joining your podcasting mastermind, which is $10,000 a year, or buying your course, or your consulting services or whatever, then I'm going to go, wow, the first like 50 minutes of this was great. And then I have this sour taste in my mouth because Guillaume like pitched me and put me in the box. And so I think that's where people have to be really careful, is like, if you approach podcasting from a networking perspective as like, hey, like I interviewed someone for my podcast a couple weeks ago who's built $2 billion companies. And like, I followed him on Twitter for a while. I invited him on my podcast. We chatted. We had a great time. Now, like, I can email him anytime and he'll respond. And it's because we spent an hour talking, we built some rapport, and we're friends to some degree. And if I see him at a conference, it'll be cool. And so it's just like that kind of wedge in the door. it's that in that you can get to where when you go to an in-person event or you go to do something else or you're going to have a digital symposium, you can invite that person and it's not cold, right? It's somewhat warm.
I love this. And to add my little take on it. So couldn't agree more with everything you said, Craig. And actually, so if you're thinking about starting a podcast to network in your industry and potentially get lead gen, I think everything Craig just mentioned is spot on. And actually what will happen is, well, of course you will say, hey, we are doing a podcast, usually in the pre-brief call, right? Or in the introduction, you'll be like, oh yeah, we do this, and the idea of the podcast is to do that. People are not stupid, right? Especially if you start getting quality guests on the show. They're like, oh, interesting, that guy proposes podcast services. And then they will eventually come to you. Like, people buy from people, not from companies. So it's about that rapport that you build. And I 100% agree on the spammy thing. And actually, the best way is probably to add even more value once you have had the interview. Typically, what we do is we send something which is an additional piece of value without asking for anything else. And we're just like, hey, here is something because, hey, you came on the show, so thank you very much. And that's also a potential door in, but if people don't want to step into it, that's totally fine and no questions asked. But doing it the soft sell way is probably the best way to go. And I always caveat that with it needs to be genuine to begin with. Like if you don't believe in the topic you're talking about on your podcast, probably don't do it because the intention needs to genuinely be about appearing as thought leaders, yes, networking, but also providing value to the audience. Because, I mean, like you, Craig, right? And like any guest on the Podcast Gurus show, people will also come to, hey, network, come into the, tap into the audience of the other person. Yeah. If it's just about trying to sell stuff, it's not gonna stick. Couldn't agree more. Craig, how does a medical sales person becomes so big in podcasting? Sorry, I had to ask the question.
Yeah, no. So I think like I don't know if it's like a lot of folks, but yeah, I mean, I think the honest thing is I probably had a bit of a midlife crisis early on. It was, I had just had my second child and was traveling a lot, was super stressed out. Man, I'm really good at that thumbs up thing.
Yeah, that's so good, man.
Super like stressed out with work, missing a lot of family time. It was just like, this is terrible. Like I want to own my time. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like I started my podcast. I got serious about getting out of that, a lot of people call it the rat race, to go do something else. And I think that like largely it's been successful. I mean, we moved to France. We lived in Annecy for 5 years. It was amazing. It was like a life-changing experience for all of us. We miss it dearly a lot of days. But like none of us will ever be the same after that. And that's like a thing that I was able to give our family and my wife and kids that like we can't ever put a price on. That like a day job, you just couldn't do that. Being an entrepreneur is really hard though. And there's a lot to it that is a lot harder than having a day job. The stress, the responsibility, the time, the pressure, all can't be overstated. And I think for a lot of people, like they should just stick with a day job. And maybe just like stick with a day job where you can work remotely, because like being a really good marketer or salesperson or copywriter or developer, you can make really great money, work for an American company or UK company, live in the south of France, right, for really cheap, right? And like live the life and everyone is happy. So I think the thing with being an entrepreneur is you hope that there's this opportunity to go to like 2 levels up. As an employee, like you could become wealthy and you could retire early and all this kind of stuff, the FIRE stuff, but you're never going to be a multi-millionaire. And like, I don't know if that's like a good goal or not after 10 years as an entrepreneurship. And like, I'm not a multi-millionaire. So like, I think that like the surer path, the more certain path is to just keep a day job, be smart with your money, work remotely, live in a cheap place, have a good quality of life. There's a potential as an entrepreneur to go to like 5 levels up. And I think that's what a lot of us are chasing. That's what I'm chasing. Because I can achieve the lifestyle I have a lot of different ways.
This is not a motivational video for people who wants to become an entrepreneur. But
It's a cautionary tale. Yeah.
Exactly. What kept you going then, Craig? Because I mean, now obviously you have different business ventures. You're clearly successful. But what kept you going when you were a bit in the midst of it, right? Like, yeah, things are working well, but as you said, the thing we feel the most together with Hussam is that kind of sometimes ball in the stomach that you're like, yeah, right now things are good, but one or two of our biggest clients leave us, and we go back to firing half the team and go back to hustling every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Touching wood has not happened yet,
Yeah.
but it exists, right? Whereas, as you said, as an employee, there is a bit more certainty. Now, it also depends on how you look at it, because I think it's 20% of the staff of Spotify has been fired quite in a short period of time. So things can still happen, but it's less certain than an employee. Anyways, my question to you is, what kept you going then?
Yeah, even with everything I said, it's at a point as an entrepreneur, you become unemployable. That's the cliche term. It's like, I've been doing this so long, and I'm used to being my own boss so strongly that to be someone else's boss would be just really hard. And I think I'm definitely at that point. And I think there's a lot of ways to work around that, right? You can just be a consultant. You can choose to work with whoever you want, and they're still your boss, but to a different degree. You can fire them, right? They can fire you, but you can fire them, and having that optionality, I think, is pretty strong. But yeah, I think that the kind of owning my own time and destiny is one of the biggest motivations. And I think it's a personal thing where I just deeply, deeply dislike being told what to do. And that's probably the biggest motivator, is for all the kind of shit of entrepreneurship, the best thing is that nobody tells me what to do. And so I trade all the bad stuff for basically that one really good thing.
Couldn't agree more. Well, at the end of the day, you figure out also that clients can kind of tell you what to do, but as of a certain point, you can choose with whom you work, and that's just gold. What's the thing nobody asks you about podcasting, Craig, or that people don't ask you enough about podcasting that you wish you'd be asked more because you genuinely think that there is so much value in that? Like, what's the thing people overlook that could yet bring them so much value in podcasting? But you know what, you can extend it to any field. If it can be about podcasting, that'd be amazing.
I want to say like what microphone to use, but of course that's the least important thing. Right. What is the thing that people overlook? Wow, that's a really good question. I think it's probably, if I look at myself and my podcasting journey, it is kind of closing the loop of promoting the content with you and your guest and your audience. Because like what I do a lot of times, and I don't know if you're better, like I hope you are for your sake, is like I do a lot of work to create the content and find the guests and record, and then our team edits it and they create all this stuff, and then it just goes out there, and I don't do a good enough job of promoting it and engaging with my guests' audience and finding where they're hanging out and joining their Facebook group or whatever. But that really is, I mean, it becomes social media marketing, but for your podcast. And I just really, really believe that is the way that really successful podcasts grow intentionally. Like some podcasts just hit it and they take off because the content is so good. And that's like going back to the creator dream. Like that's the dream of a lot of creators, but the problem is that's really hard. What's not hard is having like a process and a system for, okay, we record the episode from Riverside and it goes to the Castos Productions team or the Podcast Gurus team, and then they edit it and we get it back. And then from there, we're going to do these 8 things over the next week. And we're going to do them every week. And whether you have a VA or you have the marketing person on your team or you as the founder, you do it and you put it into Buffer or whatever, or ConvertKit. Like you got to do that stuff. And I just don't. And I think a lot of people don't. And then they go, well, why is my podcast not bigger? Well, because you're not marketing it. Like almost nothing grows by itself. You have to get out there, and social media, for all of its terrible things, is a great way to kind of spread the word about what you're doing. And if you do it in a genuine, authentic way, and you have a good thing to point back to, it's amazing.
Now you're sending a curveball. That's the question I used to answer, not used to answer to. I mean, I like that point of being kind of omni-channel, right? So Adam Shepherd, who's the organizer of the British Podcast Award, who we had on the show, was published. It's the last episode we published at the time we are recording this episode, and he said something that's really got to me. It's like nobody listens to a podcast by accident. Meaning, when you go on a Apple Podcast on Spotify, it's not a search engine. Sorry, it's not a search engine. It's not like you're gonna type in a topic and you're gonna get the best proposition in. They are based on music. They are music app to begin with, so you need to kind of have an exact match of what you're looking for. And usually, the way that happens is you're gonna Google or you're gonna look for the podcast that you have heard of, or that somebody told you about, or that you found on another platform that you want to dig a little bit more into. So I really like that take of saying, I think 10 years ago, if you would have started a podcast and you had great content, you could have hacked it and like grown exponentially because it was a medium that was growing, and also not lots of people were doing it. I don't know, I guess saying 10 years ago, you would ask who's listened to podcasts. You would have a few hands raised in the room, and now you're saying who has a podcast, and you have everybody raising their hand.
Right.
So that it has evolved so much that you need to stand out from the noise, and the good way to do that is market the podcast, as you said. Now, what's the question nobody asks me about that I think should be considered more? I'm going to take 2-3 seconds to think about this one. I think it's a great one. So lead gen is for sure something that not enough people do about podcasting. A lot of people want to get it right from the get-go, whereas it's just, when we started with Usam, our first podcast, we didn't even know the market. We were just like, let's do something for fun. And we thought we were recording with a kind of, I don't know how to call this in English, a kind of microphone that you like stick to your shirt. Yeah. Exactly. And we had one, so we were putting it on my laptop and we were recording there. And after 30 episodes, we found out that we were recording with the microphone of the laptop and not even that microphone. So like we had a laugh. We found out why our audio was so terrible. But it doesn't matter because we started something. We started having a very small audience and it's kind of compounded. So just starting in the podcast world is the thing. A thing that we do that is so niche that it's even hard to explain is link building with podcasting. So we basically set up podcasts, branded podcasts that will bring value. That the first intention always needs to be bringing value to an industry, exchanging with peers, exchanging with thought leaders. But then what we do for our clients is we have guests linked to their website and they get higher in the Google search results. And for certain companies, I'm giving you business ideas here, Craig, that has huge values, but it's so complex to put in place that's maybe why it's not talked about enough. Yeah, that's my rant to say that I don't know what to answer to this question, Craig, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's a great answer.
But yeah, maybe, so here we go. To summarize, podcast is seen as a medium that can indeed be listened to by millions of people. But the huge advantage of it is that so far, there is not one platform owning it. There is not one and unique way of monetizing a podcast. There are plenty. And it can only, the limit is how creative you are in the way you would do that. And that's what we love in that medium, basically. That's what we entered into it as an agency as well. Is like, no matter what you want to do, there is probably a spot for a podcast. Unless you're a terrible speaker, probably don't go into podcasting or learn how to speak first. But yeah, that's it. Like, so many ways to do podcasting that are not getting in front of 1,000 or 1 million people. Just have to be a bit creative and find a way to hack it.
I've got another one.
Go for it.
Yeah, you should stand up when you're podcasting.
Yes.
So I have a standing desk, and I do 100% of my podcast standing up, just because like you sound better. I have more energy. It's interesting to like move around on your feet. So I never did it for a long time, and now I do it, and I just never, ever, ever will sit down for a podcast episode again. I know you're sitting right now.
I love this advice. I'm sitting right now. But so the story is, so I recently moved in this house, and we have a few rooms. And my objective was to have a podcast studio where I could be standing up. But I'm really near the roof. So actually, I'm too tall or the roof is too low for me to be able to stand whilst I record podcast and have a decent enough background. Otherwise, 100%, I would have done that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great advice. I love it. And in general, walking when you're standing up is great.
Yeah.
Craig, there is a question we ask all our guests to wrap up these episodes. It is the following: 3 podcasts that you listen to yourself that you would recommend our audience. It can be into the, entrepreneurship world, into the podcasting world, or anything else. If you love dog training and you listening to a podcast about dog training, please shoot. What does Craig Hewitt listens to?
Yeah. So it's funny. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I only listen to them at the gym, and I'm at the gym, say 2.5 hours a week. Because I work from home, I don't commute. I don't like listening to them when I'm walking the dog or something like that, because that's my kind of unplugged time. But I listen to 3 podcasts. One is called Startups for the Rest of Us. A guy named Rob Walling. He's kind of the guru of SaaS. So I've been on the podcast a few times. Rob's a good friend. They're an investor. It's the podcast if you want to learn about SaaS. The other is similar, but kind of just general kind of online business. It's called Tropical MBA. Dan and Ian talk a lot about like remote companies, growing online business culture, travel. Amazing. They've been doing it similarly long to Rob, like 10 years. And the other one is a podcast called Built to Sell. It's by a guy named John Warrillow. John wrote the book Built to Sell, Built to Sell Radio. And it's just about like how to prepare to sell your business. And this is something that I've wanted to sell a business forever. I don't know that I'll ever sell Castos now because it's such a good business, but I love hearing the stories of people selling their business and buying the 65-foot sailboat and living in, whatever, the south of France. And
voila, indeed.
Yeah.
How much would you sell Castos for, Craig? Here's a curveball for you.
Oh, enough. I don't want to say. Yeah. I would sell it for enough.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair. So I guess to the question, I'm not a multimillionaire yet. You would become if you would sell Castos. Yeah. I mean, the price you would want to sell Castos would have to be around those lines.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Craig, it was an absolute pleasure. I really, really enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, Guillaume, thank you very much. This was a lot of fun.